Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Monday, August 23rd, 2023, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the Synod of Dorks. It's officially called that from now until all history. It's not the Synod of Dort, it is the Synod of Dorks. And I'm also going to talk to you guys about means. Means to a Calvinist just means works, okay? It really means what we do to accomplish God's will, but God gets the glory for it. He's ultimately controlling everything, okay? What it does is it basically gets the Calvinist to think in terms of to act in terms of their own works and their own manipulation, to be motivated in terms of their own works and their own manipulation, but to be cognitively dissonant and pretend that God's doing all that, okay? Now, the Bible does very clearly state that God is going to use malevolent forces to accomplish his purposes at times. Not always, but at times. So he's going to use a wicked king to punish Israel, for instance. That's not something that requires any kind of control of a person's will. It's just about knowing the motives of my enemy's enemies. It's that simple. Politicians do this all the time. Kings and popes and stuff like that have done this all throughout history. If I have a guy I'm trying to control, and I can't control him, but I have another guy who I know would love to take his throne, and I'm the pope, well, that's one way that I can use somebody who's not necessarily working for me to subdue this guy. Why? Because now this guy's attacking him, and now he needs my support for the other kingdoms and blah blah blah. It's just manipulation. That's all it is, okay? And if you guys, I don't know how many of you guys know Calvinists personally, but I've known a lot of Calvinists personally, and I gotta tell you, they're manipulative people. They're manipulative people. They're always using clever word games and stuff like that. And I believe that much of our American political sphere is because of that. What you find is, think about it like this: is when you get into the early church, we're talking 3rd through 5th centuries, the guys who came out on top, which are really the Orthodox, until pretty much the Muslims started taking over Orthodox territory, the guys who were coming out on top were trained in rhetoric, and because they were trained in rhetoric, clever argumentation was central to what they did. Okay, honesty was not central to what they did. Honest reflection was not central to what they did. And if I don't know, because I wasn't raised in Calvinism, I don't have a framework to say here's how I came out of Calvinism in terms of just sincerity and integrity, because that's all it takes. But I do know how I came out of dispensationalism, which I was raised in. It's the same mentality, and dispensationalism was invented by a Calvinist too, okay? In fact, most of your bad church methodology and bad church ideas in America came from Calvinists. Dispensationalism came from Calvinists. Church growth methodology came from Calvinists. Psychology in the churches came from Calvinists, came from Presbyterian. Theatrics, stage theatrics in the church came from a Calvinist. That's Whitefield. The hellfire preaching to scare people into heaven really came from Jonathan Edwards, but then Finney became an Arminian, but he was a Presbyterian beforehand. Okay, so these were the evangelical Calvinists. The reason, and then the rest of the evangelical Calvinists just infiltrated other churches. So you had them either infiltrate and take over the Congregationalist churches, or they infiltrated and took over Baptist churches. That's what happened to the Puritans. Okay, they didn't just disappear. They were known for having tons of kids. So where did they go? And the answer is, well, the Congregationalist churches became New Light Congregationalist churches, which basically we believe in the born again experience, but we still try to rationalize all our Calvinism. Many of them actually became Unitarians. They actually just became flaming liberals. That's why you have so many liberals up in the northeast of America. That's why, basically, the most liberal parts of the country are New England and San Francisco. Well, why? Well, New England is where all your Calvinists were. And Calvinism does not produce spiritual fruit it's motivated to win and take over and dominate and destroy. And once it has that, once it has the dominance in a region, it just dies because it's not evangelical. It is not an evangelical faith. And when you get to Jonathan Edwards, he just slapped the born again experience that Whitefield was teaching, which he got from the Wesleys, who got it from the Pietists, which were Germans basically who left Lutheranism to believe in actually preaching the gospel, essentially. They just kind of mixed in predestination with this born again experience and just kind of rationalized it after the fact. But that wasn't their original teaching. They didn't have any such teaching. They taught basically salvation through infant baptism up until like the mid 1700s. Okay, so when Calvinists are now trying to reframe themselves as evangelical, they're flat out lying. Okay, they taught baptismal regeneration, which was primarily infant baptism, until the mid-1700s. And then when the evangelicals basically took over America, they started changing their tune and started shifting their denominations and started infiltrating Baptist church, and they started really trying to copy what genuine evangelicals were doing. And most of those evangelicals were influenced, I'm going to have whole videos on this because it's in my book. They're more influenced by the German Pietists, who believe in trying to actually convert people. They believe in trying to preach a loving gospel to people and trying to convert people. And so they start trying to convert slaves. They start trying to convert natives. They're actually preaching, and they're actually loving and walking it out. And they're actually, this is the Moravian church started under Nicholas von Zinzendorf. They start basically bringing in all the denominations of people who the Lutherans and the Calvinists and the Catholics were persecuting, and they start the Moravian church. And then they start the Moravian Missionary Society. And even though their base theological roots were Lutheran because they came out of Germany, they really were a first attempt at a ecumenical, non-denominational church. And they were all over. They were all over Africa. They were advocating against slavery in Europe. They were preaching to the slaves. They were in America preaching to the slaves. And then you had the Quakers for 100 years before the Great Awakening. They were preaching the born-again experience, okay? They weren't calling it the born-again experience. They were calling it the inner light, but it really started when George Fox was having basically demonic torments and just going around trying to get salvation for that, and nobody had any answers for him. Nobody had any answers for him. And so, I mean, they're literally telling him to try smoking and bloodletting and stuff like that to try to get free from whatever he's going through. And then he eventually accepts Christ and he gets free, and then he starts basically preaching open air preaching. So Whitefield didn't invent open air preaching, George Fox did. You're talking a full almost 100 years before Whitefield starts doing open air preaching. Everybody else's preaching was a combination of politics and polemics from their pulpits. Nobody was preaching the gospel in Europe. The assumption was you're all saved because you're all infant baptized. And George Fox actually started preaching out in the air and telling people, no, you're not saved because you live like the devil. He made Oliver Cromwell cry, okay, because I don't know what he said to him, but he was full of the Holy Spirit. He probably had some bad theology in there because he started basically going against baptism and basically anything ritual, essentially. He went a pendulum swing too far and started going against anything ritual, and then he started going against order, and he really was kind of a neo-Montanist. But he definitely believed in the Holy Spirit being in the person who's saved and producing fruit. That was the point. And you didn't have this among Lutherans and Catharines. They were really a bunch of freaking murderers who just had quote-unquote right theology. So that takes us to around George Fox's era, and this is what went down. And I just want you guys to understand how bad this is. So you're about 100 years after Luther beginning his Reformation, and the Lutherans have been basically fighting battles with the Roman popes, with kind of a coalition of the Roman popes and the Holy Roman Emperors, okay? And the French are Catholic, but they don't care. So they'll, my enemy's enemy is my friend, and they're all playing this game. Okay, so you basically have a bunch of Lutheran principalities that are pretty strong. The Austrian Catholic principalities are strong as well, but the German principalities, Germans and Austrians are kind of interrelated, but like the German principalities that were Catholic were typically weaker, and so the Germans were basically in kind of a battle back and forth and civil war and kind of limited opposition and stuff like that with periods of peace and stuff like that between the descendants of King Charles V. Okay, and basically Charles V is going to split his empire between the Spanish, and that's where basically the Kingdom of Spain comes from, and then the Austrians, which is where ultimately the Austro-Hungarian Empire comes from. But before the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it was just called the Holy Roman Empire, okay? Because the Austrians really inherited that, and then Spain became its own kingdom. And he starts basically, during his era, they start getting rebellions in the Netherlands, okay? So around that day, you have the Dutch Republic starting to form. And the Dutch Republic is not really rocket science. It's not that hard to understand. What it really is basically you have all these little German principalities here, and then the lowlands are pretty rich farmland, okay? And so you have some decent money there. They're not only rich farmland, but they're ports, and so you can ship out primarily in the start farm goods, but these guys are eventually going to go on to form pretty strong shipping trade, okay? And so they're going to actually be the first basically Northern Europeans to colonize North America. You're going to have the Spanish basically colonize Florida and everything south of that. The Portuguese are going to colonize Brazil. And then eventually you're going to have the French colonize Louisiana. And from there, they're going to go up the Mississippi and travel all the way up through Canada. And that's basically the French territories. And then the Dutch are going to colonize what's now like New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, the eastern shores of that. And they're all doing this around this time, okay? They're starting to colonize here. And then you have the Dutch East India Trading Company. So you actually have competition then. I think the Portuguese were running most of the spice trade. And the Dutch are coming into that. And you have this guy who the Calvinists are going to murder, who starts the Joint Stock Corporation. He invents the Joint Stock Corporation. And what you have out of this then is basically a situation where a bunch of people can basically put their money together and go on a business venture, okay? And that business venture, then they share the profits. And what that created was a much quicker way to build up financial resources to go after something. And you didn't have this prior to that, because the way you got money for big ventures like this was either from the state, maybe from the church, or from somebody who was just super rich. So you didn't have things commissioned like this unless there was a king doing it, okay? This made a way for private citizens to come and launch basically big international ventures in a way that rivaled the economic power of a king, okay? And so this is new, okay? Well, they're going to kill the guy who does this because he is too nice to the Arminians, and they're going to just take opportunity and get one of his political rivals to oust him in a coup, and then they're going to kill him, okay? So as these guys are coming up with these financial resources and international ventures, one of the things that they're going to need for these ventures are mercenaries. They're going to need people who are going to defend them, because in a lot of cases they're going to be fighting with natives, or they're going to be just fighting with other colonial powers. And so they need to bring along mercenaries for the physical stuff. So where do you think these guys are going to get these mercenaries from? Well, the answer is Switzerland. Switzerland is sending mercenaries all over the empire. And you're going to find an overlap, an association between Calvinists and mercenaries. So for instance, not Oliver Cromwell, but his grandfather, Thomas Cromwell, who was basically instrumental in Henry Tudor's reform. He's a mercenary, okay? Or he was a mercenary before that, okay? So these guys who have these mercenary connections, their main connection point, if they're Protestant, which the majority of them were, is going to be Calvinism, because you have this packageable system that's not necessarily bound to the Roman state like Luther's system was. Luther's system was entirely based on the Roman state and canon law, which is why he could justify rebelling as the Church and the Holy Roman Emperor, because he is following the state religion of Rome. And that's why Lutheranism primarily becomes the state religion of Germany and then the Scandinavian countries after that, because it was really the only alternative, and you stop seeing Lutheranism spread to any countries once Calvinism starts becoming a thing, okay? Calvinism is then going to get imported to places that need mercenaries. And so you're going to see Calvinism go to Europe, you're going to see it go to Scotland, you're going to see it go to the Netherlands, and they're going to infiltrate German churches and Lutheran churches in Germany and make them Calvinists, okay? Nothing that they do is in the up and up. Calvinism is never coming about anywhere on the planet because people are preaching Calvinism and people are like, oh, that makes sense. It's never like that. It's always mixed in with orchestrated deals to either overthrow the Pope and his church or basically overthrow the government. And so when they do this, they need their church justification for it, and they need to basically make it about some false church issue. So that way these people who are all part of this church and have all been taught that overthrowing your government is wrong, have a justification. And so what they're doing is they're saying, well, that we're protecting the church, we're defending the church, and that's often the common cause, okay? Later it becomes defending the commonwealth and basically defending the greater financial and material good of all of us. That's what it becomes. And those ideas come from Calvinism too. Because Calvin is going to argue in his On Civil Government that basically God ordains the overthrow of certain monarchs when they become tyrants. Well, what makes a monarch a tyrant is completely arbitrary. If we're not happy with him, he's a tyrant. So if we get too poor or we too many people die in war or whatever, then all of a sudden our monarch is a tyrant, and basically the ethos is he is justified to be overthrown. And of course, when he gets overthrown, they're going to say, it's God's will. It's God's will. It's the person who actually did the overthrowing was sinning, but it was a lawful evil. That's what they're going to call it, and they're going to compare it to when the women lied to Pharaoh so they didn't have to murder the babies of the Egyptian. The Egyptian midwives lied to Pharaoh so they didn't have to murder the babies of the Israelites. This is going to be in the Geneva Bible, and it's going to be in Calvin's On Civil Government. Calvin is not necessarily trying to create a theory for overthrowing governments. Remember, he's becoming the chief theologian of the Swiss after Zwingli died in his attempts to unify Switzerland under the Reformation. Okay, so Calvinism basically is kind of after the fact. And what he's doing is he's really trying to come up with something that is a better form of Augustinianism that with better selling features than Luther's Augustinianism, because Luther's Augustinianism only works if you are claiming some level of civil authority. Calvin is basically trying to sell something to people who are already essentially free, because the Swiss basically had formed essentially a league of cities, and these cities basically agreed to their common defense, and that defense eventually came up against the Holy Roman Emperors, and they had basically existed in a state of relative freedom. So sometimes they would get invaded by the Austrians, and they'd be fighting, having mercenaries fight for and against the French, but basically they became a bunch of free states, and they're mostly sending out mercenaries to other countries, and that's how they're enriching the state. That's why the Swiss did business with the Nazis. The Swiss have always been about money first, mercenaries, no real loyalties except to each other, okay? Because they live in this land that is basically very mountainous, and you have basically mountains and then valleys with cities in them, and mountains and valleys and cities with them. And so it's very hard to take this over. On the other hand, if these cities are all unified, they can keep reinforcing each other in every which direction, And they basically become an unstoppable force if they're united. Okay, and you have different language groups here. You have some French and some German speaking. You have some Catholic and some Protestant. But while they were all still Catholic, they basically started signing pacts together that they would mutually defend each other, and that's how it becomes a land of mercenaries. So when Zwingli takes this over, Zwingli is essentially going to say, he's going to sit down with a bunch of these magistrates in Zurich. And Calvin's going to go to Geneva, but he goes to Basel and then Geneva. But essentially, these guys in Zurich are basically going to sit down and plot a new religion. Okay, they're not trying to sit there with the Bible and go, we just want to know what the truth is. They're trying to come up with basically an excuse to break away from the Roman state. Because remember, you're paying massive taxes to the Roman popes through your church, okay? You're paying tithes to your church, and then those tithes have these annates that keep going up to the pope. And you want to think about like, imagine your church, okay? Let's say you have a church, and I'm in Phoenix, okay? So let's say you have a church here, and that church has 1,000 people in it. And those 1,000 people are tithing 10%, okay? That means within a year, 10%, you're going to have quite a bit of money coming in. And every time the Pope decides that a new bishop comes in, that bishop is supposed to take half of that money from that year and give it to the Pope. Well, the popes can keep shifting around bishops as much as they want, okay? They could just do this every 2 years. You're getting a new bishop. Why? He's going over here for reasons. Why? They literally can just keep shuffling them around. And every time they shuffle these bishops around, then half of that year's income from the tithes goes to them. Okay? That's a lot of stinking money. So if you think about if you have 100 people paying 10%, okay? That means what comes to that bishop is 10 times what a normal person makes. Okay? 10 times what a normal person makes. The bishop is the richest guy in town, except for the fact that, he's got to pay for a building, which is not that expensive, okay? A building is nothing. When you get 100 people together, and you say, okay, we're going to give you 10% of your wages for a year from 100 people, and we need a building big enough to basically meet in once a week, because that's all they're really doing, okay? And it's basically going to double up in a lot of cases as their town hall. So, it saves a government expense too. And that's it. Once it's built, and these people are building these things very sturdy and very solid. A lot of cases in stone and wood and stuff like that, but they're solid. You're done. You're done. There's not a ton of upkeep to this building. There's not a ton of money that goes into it. Okay. And then these guys make it a little more ornate and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's just a cash flow. It's just this massive cash flow to these bishops and then ultimately to the popes. And that's why the popes, being way down here, are able to field their own armies. They actually have the papal states actually extend to about half of Italy at one point in time that they've taken over. And then they're able to hire mercenaries. And then the popes are able to hire mercenaries themselves. And they're able to have wars and international ventures and stuff like that, all off of money that's being paid from them, from all these bishops all over Europe. The popes had a ton of money. They still do have a ton of money. And that excludes the selling of indulgences and paying for your christenings and paying for last rites and all that stuff where they pray for your people who've passed away who are in purgatory. You're giving them money for all this stuff. And that's a lot of common people giving them tips for nothing, for imaginary error, basically. They're like, oh, yep, you're going on the list. And they say your name in a church service, and you just paid $100 for that. It's like the people who pay... It's like the people who pay for super chats. It's like, I just want to hear my voice, my name, my person mentioned, except it's about getting out of purgatory or having your time shortened in purgatory or whatever. These people are paying big bucks for this. So you have all this money flowing into them. And these guys know, hey, if we sever from the Pope, That's a lot more money that stays local. This was a major part of Luther's arguments. That's why you have these revolts that start afterwards, that they start shouting, German money for the German people, because Luther is definitely making about how much money is leaving Germany and going into the hands of the popes, who then manipulate and basically have spies everywhere and start wars everywhere. Okay, so these guys, they just want to break away, and these guys want to break away. These guys are sick of being these guys up here are part of a kingdom that the guy mostly lives down here, and his family members mostly control over here. But these guys over here are a major economic bloc becoming a thing, okay? So they're starting to do international trade, and they basically started with peasants' revolts back in the 16th century. And these peasants' revolts are literally, these things start out with simple things like these lords and these nobility and stuff like that will literally be like, you can't hunt and fish on our lands. See, the idea was like the peasants belong to the land and the land belongs to the peasants, but really the land belongs to the lords and the peasants are slaves, okay? But they've got this unique system that's been worked out with the Catholics and basically the Germanics, the Franks, that you live on the land. We're not calling you a slave, we're calling you a free man, okay? This is brilliant. You're called a free man. You're not a slave. Okay, well, what does a free man get to do? Well, you don't get to move, and you don't get to own anything. You'll own nothing, and you'll be happy. This is just so you know, this is where Klaus Schwab and these guys got this. This is what they want to bring us back to. You own nothing, and you're happy. So what happens? Well, you live on the land. You can build a house on the land. That's fine. And you're going to farm the land, and you can basically eat the food off the land, but you got to give a certain amount to the lords of the land, okay? Because it's his land, right? And so you're going to work his fields, but you also get to eat off the field. So essentially, we're slaves. So we're his slaves. No, you're not his slaves. You're free men, okay? It sounds like we're slaves. No, you're free men, okay? Okay, so we're getting hungry, though, because we're always... Oh, by the way, you have to give up a certain amount of your sons to fight in his armies, too. Yeah, and we like to fight wars constantly. If you don't think this many little kingdoms is not fighting a lot of wars for little bits of territory, he wants another tract of land so he can build another farm. There's some iron ore in there. He wants that, okay? So we're going to fight over it. So your kids are going to die for him. You're going to... do all the work, you're going to supply the armies, and you don't have any land of your own. Sounds like we're slaves. No, you're called freemen, okay? Okay, well, we're getting hungry now because there's been a lot of wars and a lot of money needing to go to feed armies and less people to work the land, and this is starting to suck really hard. So we're going to go hunt and fish now. No, you can't go hunt and fish now. Why? Because the land belongs to the nobles. I thought it was our land. No, the land belongs to the nobles. The forests belong to the nobles. You guys have the land, but not the forests. But that's where all the food is. All the free food. You know how deer grow and rabbits grow and fish grow by themselves. That's where all the free food is. Yeah, but that belongs to them. Why? Because they like to take their friends out there and they like to all ride horses and chase one fox. And they like to go travel through the land and hunt a deer because it makes them feel manly when they've got 50 guys on horses to go hunt a deer. That's gay. Yes, they're all mostly gay. Many of them are gay, but they all have 3 wives because of all these political marriages too. These are not the manly men of old, okay? These nobles are becoming increasingly effeminate over time. And you're finding less and less and less of these royals actually involved in combat, okay, or leading armies or anything like that. They've got generals now, and they've got mercenaries running stuff. And eventually these mercenaries are like, we do all the fighting, and these people are like, yeah, and we do all the working. And they're like, yeah, well, maybe we can get together and form a republic. Since these guys basically just get all their power from the Pope. And once we start breaking from the Pope, we can start basically, having a little bit of equality here. Okay? Because this sucks. And they're going to all pull major moral justification for what they're doing from Calvinism, but also because they all have mercenaries involved with what they're doing, they're going to get a lot of people from Switzerland to help them. And Switzerland is not just Swiss people, okay? One is there's no such people called the Swiss, okay? There's no such national group called the Swiss. These are basically, think about it like this. You have the Franks are Germans, the Austrians are Germans, the Germans are Germans, the Burgundians are Germans. All these people all throughout here are mostly Germanic peoples, okay? Back in the day, there were Celts mixed in them. And then you had Romans basically fight down here and fight some of the Germans up here, and they had Gaul. Okay, and the Gauls are Galatians. Those are the same peoples. These are Galatians, but those are Celtic peoples too. Or they're Gaelic. Okay, but they're all descendants of Magog. These were Scythian peoples. And these people spread from Turkey originally and became Mongolia. They became the Picts, which became the Scots and the Celts of Ireland, and the Gauls were some of them. And then these people get taken over by the Romans in the south and mostly the Germans in the north. Mostly Germanic people. You're going to have Teutonic Knights, and then you're going to have way up here in Scandinavia. I believe those are going to be the same people that the Russians come from. But those are going to be your main people groups who are dominant, okay? So by the time you get here, you have mostly Germanic peoples here. And the Swiss here, you have different language groups forming because you have the Anglo-Saxons become the English language, the Franks mixing with the Romans because they were very much embedded with the Romans for many centuries. They become the French language. The mixture of Roman language, so Latin, and Islamic becomes the Spanish language because this is like half Muslim for a while. So you're going to find a lot of overlap between Spanish and Muslim. Portuguese is Portugal, literally means port of Gaul. So you're going to have a lot of similarities in the overlap between the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese languages. Italian is going to be closer to Roman. But it's going to have mixtures of Greek and it's going to have mixtures of Spanish in it. And the Italian language seems kind of like in between that. You have the Romanian language, which is like Eastern Romans, who are like remnants of, I think, the Byzantine Empire. And those guys are going to speak Romanian, and I think that's going to be a mixture of Slavic and Latin. And then you're going to have the Austrians. They're going to be Germans as well. And in the middle of all of this, you have the Swiss. And the main languages the Swiss are going to adopt is going to be French and German. I think today it's mostly French, German, and English. But you're going to have, because Saxony is over here, and I think the Angles came way before this, but like you're going to have dissidents from all these countries, either because they were mercenaries, and like a lot of mercenaries, eventually you've done some stuff and you can't go home, okay? Or eventually you just like that adventurous life and you've got, lady friends in multiple places and you can't settle down and get married. Or you're just on the outs and that's why you became a mercenary in the first place, like David's mighty men, okay? Or Absalom's men, okay? And so these guys basically are going to coalesce down here, and what you're going to have here is you're going to have a mixture of French, German, and English. And English is actually going to become one of the major languages here, and that's why the Geneva Bible is in English, but it's written by Calvinists. Because the English who came here and joined the Calvinists, they got the Geneva Bible, and then they exported that back to England. And what you have, wherever Calvinism goes, is revolt. They eventually overthrow the government. Why? Because they have a Bible that's telling you it's just to overthrow the government. Okay? They're telling you, Calvin is telling you it's wrong for you to physically overthrow the government. It's sin, but it's God's will. Figure that out. So who's going to do this? Well, we don't have an Assyrian Empire who's a pagan who's going to punish everybody. Everybody's a Christian. So who's going to do this? Well, somebody's going to volunteer. And we just happen to have a bunch of mercenaries that love killing anyways, and they're going to volunteer. And they're going to go down in history as a hero, but we're going to be like, that was a sin though, so you're going to have to ask for forgiveness. Okay, so what, do some Hail Marys or something? And be like, whatever, we'll figure this out later. We'll come up with the theology for this later, but you can overthrow the government, just you got to be sorry when you're done. That's what they do, okay? Eventually they're not sorry. By the time you get to America, they're not sorry, okay? But for now, they're sorry, and then by the time you get to Cromwell, he's going to be like, we're going to overthrow the government because we're ushering in the millennium. That's literally what Cromwell thought, okay? All your all your crazy eschatology stuff started with the Puritans. Don't let anyone try to tell you it was Darby and Schofield. No, Darby was a Calvinist too. But the Puritans, listen, the pre-millennial, we're going to usher in the millennium stuff by overthrowing the government. That came from Cromwell and the Puritans, okay? And that same mentality came to America, and they were doing slavery and genocide and all this crap in the name of Jesus. This is these freaking Calvinists. In the name of Jesus, we're going to kill the Indians. Why? Because reasons. We want their land, and it's not just greed, it's God taking dominion of the earth. Don't think these people weren't like that. They were totally like that. And you got guys with bows and arrows coming up against guys with armor and guns. Okay? Well, who's going to win that fight? Well, we're going to take their Thanksgiving help, and then we're going to kill them. Okay? Go read your actual history. We're going to take their Thanksgiving help so we survive, and then we're going to genocide them. Read about your real pilgrims, okay? These people are not good people. So anyways, by the time you get to the Dutch Republic, and it's not really a republic yet, they're in a civil war. And what you have is a civil war that ends with a truce for a while. Because this is why these guys go into truce. We're still in a state of war, but honestly, we need to rebuild up our troop count because we've killed too many of our peasants. That's really what's going on, okay? And during this time, you have the fledgling elements of a government form in the Netherlands. And you're going to have this, it's called like the Grand something or other, but basically it's going to be like a parliament, okay? Parliament, the reason Parliament is called Parliament is because they parlay between two different parties, okay? So Parliament in England, you have a Parliament in England, and you have a Parliament in Czechia, which is, remember, where the Hussites were free for a while. And then they're going to call it something else, and it eventually becomes Congress, okay? But you have versions of this. You have this representative house of government, which is representing between the people and whoever's in charge, okay? Well, this representative body of the people, who basically is kind of parlaying with the Spanish, which is really, this part, because when Charles V divided his empire, his brother's family got Austria, and his family got Spain. And they own the Netherlands. The Spanish own the Netherlands. And the Dutch are starting to have a competitive navy to the Spanish. They both have good navies. But the Dutch have a pretty solid navy. And then they invent the Joint Stock Corporation, and they've got some Munties coming in. Okay? And the Spanish have been spending a lot of money going over to the Americas and pillaging all their gold and silver, and then using that to hire mercenaries to be better in their wars. But they're starting to exhaust the people's supply. Okay, they've already genocided tons of Native Americans in the name of Jesus, and then they've spent a lot of time killing Christians in the name of Jesus, and they're literally just running out of people. So they're going to have a truce, and this truce, I forget how long the truce lasts. I want to say it's like 11 years or something like this. And during this 11 years, this is when the Synod of Dort is going to happen. Okay? Now you need to know who Jacobus Arminius is. Now your Calvinist, absolutely full of crap propagandists are going to be like, he's a new Pelagius. He's bringing back Pelagius. These guys have no idea what Pelagius taught. They have no idea what Pelagius thought about anything. All they know is Pelagius is this. They don't know. Why? Because the Catholics said he was. Okay, but why? Well, he believed that nobody needed God to get saved. Yeah, that's what this celibate monk thought. This guy who gave his whole life to a monastery thought, you don't need God to be saved. That's what he thought. Are you serious? Are you really going to think that any Christian anything who's going to devote his life to studying God's word is going to walk away saying, yeah, you don't need God to be saved? This is bullcrap. These are how they caricature their opponent's arguments. Pelagius just believed what the Orthodox always believed, which was basically what Jacobus Arminius is going to come back out with, which is essentially that they all believe in the impassible monad as God, because they all have their broken copies of the Septuagint that talk about basically wisdom being a created being, and they think that's Jesus, okay? So they all think there's a time before time where Jesus was born, but it's not in this material world, so it's a time before time, whatever the crap that means. eternity past. And the Orthodox always thought this is where the word providence comes from. This is exactly what providence means. It means to see in advance. That's what providence means, okay? And the Orthodox are always using this word providence because what they're saying is that this is what the Bible says, who God foreknew, okay? Well, the Orthodox are going to say foreknew doesn't mean that God knew them before he saved them. It means God foresaw them from eternity past believing. Foresaw them believing in Christ later, okay? This is what the Orthodox are going to think, that God foresaw that they would believe, and so on that basis, he manipulated the world to get it to the point where they were saved, okay? Now, you know who else is going to believe something like this, or at least write something like this? Augustine. Augustine's going to do this, okay? And there he's going to talk about basically the term that becomes prevenient grace, okay? This idea of a general grace that's over all people. And basically Augustine is going to do this because he knows if he comes up against free will, all the Orthodox are going to be against him. And in his day, the Orthodox are the majority of the scholars in the church. Augustine just becomes numero uno among the Roman Catholics after the Orthodox fall, basically, to the Muslims. And now you have these guys from Carthage, you have Tertullian, Cyprian, and Augustine, all of a sudden becoming the main theologians of the West, okay? Especially when they start to have a schism between East and West over the Latin Pope. They're going to... Carthage was kind of always on their side, the side of Rome. They were always, buddies. And so they're going to emphasize the guys that come out of Carthage over the guys that come out of the East. Why? Because the guys that come out of the East is going to lead to the theology that opposes them, okay? And so Augustine's not going to come up against free will. He's going to talk about this prevenient grace and this idea that, God basically makes it possible for people to make a decision, even though he foreordains who he's going to decide. And so Augustine is basically just playing clever lip service to the Orthodox while trying to come up with a condemnation for Pelagius, who critiqued his confession as saying this guy clearly can't handle celibacy, and this guy clearly has heavy doses of Manichaean Gnosticism still embedded in his brain. Okay, that's why Augustine's against Pelagius. Okay, Pelagius is not teaching anything that the Orthodox didn't teach, which is why when he went over to Jerusalem and hung out with the Orthodox and was accused by Orosius, who is basically Augustine's lapdog, they say, we don't see anything wrong here. They say, we don't see anything wrong here. And so Augustine gets another council called where it's all people who see things his way, and they get Pelagius condemned, and Pelagius isn't even there to defend himself. Pelagius is an old man. He dies by the time they call him condemned, or like a month later, okay? He's an old man. He's not trying to pick a fight in the first place. All he's doing is saying, I've read this Augustine's Confessions, and he's making it sound like God irresistibly made him to be a Christian because of his mom's prayers, and because he needed to be a Christian, he also needed to be a celibate priest, because he's just a rhetorician. And there's no jobs for rhetoricians besides being a polemic, scholar in the church. Okay? These guys are just professional debaters. That's what a rhetorician is. I'm a rhetoric teacher. Well, what is rhetoric good for? Debate. And so these guys would be hired in the courts. They were basically the predecessors to lawyers. What would you hire a rhetorician for? I'm going to give him my side of the things, and he's going to come up with a bunch of clever, manipulative arguments to persuade the judge. You didn't have a jury of your peers. You had a judge. And this guy is going to wax eloquent and make my side sound better. Okay? They're bullshit artists.
Occupation?
Stand-up philosopher.
What?
Stand-up philosopher. I coalesce the vapor of human experience into a viable and logical comprehension.
Oh, a bullshit artist.
This is why people call philosophers bullshit artists, okay? That's what a rhetorician is. They're professional smooth talkers, okay? Now, If you didn't have rhetoricians, you would just have logicians. And logicians didn't like rhetoricians because logic was about getting to the truth and rhetoric was about being more persuasive. Okay? And these two things do not agree. Because if your goal is to be more persuasive, it can't be to be right. Otherwise, sometimes they can overlap, but your fundamental goal in each science is different. One is to win and the other is to be right. Okay? Well, if you're not right, your logic is going to take you to a better truth. And if your job is to win for this guy, which is what lawyers do, which is why lawyers are known for being liars, well, then you want to be more persuasive than you want to be right. And that's where the real money is in with lawyers. I don't need, listen, if I've done nothing wrong and I can prove it, I don't need a good lawyer. But if I've done something wrong, I need a good lawyer. Okay? This is the game. And it was always the game, and that's where rhetoricians come from. And that's what Augustine was. That's what Cyprian was. That's what Paul of Samosata was. That's what all your freaking famous bishops were. They're BS artists. Okay? For hundreds and hundreds of years before you even get to Roman Catholicism being the main thing. So now you're coming out of it. Now you're coming out of it, and now you're back to a kind of religion which persuasion means something. Because for centuries, it's just been about power and authority. The Catholic Church says so, so there. Well, if you want to argue with the Catholic Church, they'll sick their lapdogs on you because everybody in all these little spheres and all these big spheres got their crowns from the Pope. And they'll manipulate them against each other, and they'll get you killed. That's how it goes. That's how they got Wycliffe exhumed and burned. That's how they got Huss burned. That's how they got tons of Waldensians and tons of other people burned at the stake over the years. That's why they came up with the Inquisition. Why? Because we want to make it about defending the faith, but really it's about getting rid of people we don't like. Okay? You can be a heretic, but if we like you, we'll let you stay. Okay? In fact, you could be a heretic, and if we like you, you might be the next pope. You could buy your way into the pope seat. Okay? It's about money and power. It's always about money and power. And these guys want to spread that power around. That's it. And when you want to spread that power around, well, a religion that's based on rhetoric and persuasiveness is a lot more valuable now. And Luther was a logician. Calvin was a rhetorician. Calvin was a trained lawyer. Luther was gonna be a lawyer, but instead he got shocked in the butt with lightning and decided to be a monk. Okay? And so he has a bunch of arguments that are based on canon law. If you understand canon law, you understand where Luther's theology comes from. You understand where Luther's justification for revolt comes from. You understand why Luther was not a fan of popular revolt. He was about authoritative revolt from certain lords who were defending the true Catholic Church. Okay? That was Luther's argumentation because he never went to Paris and got a law degree. Calvin did. Calvin, this is where lawyers come from, okay? Lawyers start out as basically this is where the rhetoricians go. They become the lawyers of canon law, okay? And they become the arguers of canon law, and not only canon law, you have whole fields of trade and stuff like that are based on all the complex, weird rules and stuff like that exist to dictate this nobility and who's greater and who's lesser and who needs to genuflect to who and how you handle disputes in the quote unquote right way, because it's all BS. It's all BS. Where did you guys get your power from? Our swords. Okay, but where did you get your legitimate power from? The Pope. And where did he get his power from? The Roman Emperor. Where's the Roman Emperor? There isn't one. Okay, so you guys are literally been operating under the jurisdiction of the Roman state for 1,000+ years, and there hasn't been a Roman emperor for a couple hundred years now. And not only that, you guys haven't submitted to that Roman emperor politically or ecclesiastically for 600 years now, but you're still operating as if he's in charge. Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's what happened. And that's what Luther is operating out of. And these mercenaries and these Calvinists have an entirely different framework. And that framework is all built on rhetoric. Okay? because they already decided they're going to defend themselves and they're not going to submit, so they're rebel scum already. But now we need an idea for these rebel scum to justify themselves theologically, and that's where Calvin steps in. And that's why the last chapter of his Institutes of the Christian Faith is on civil government. Because this is the point, okay? When you read Augustine on grace and free will, okay, his last chapters are about infant baptism. Why? Because that's your conclusion. He's going to give you a bunch of crap arguments about why predeterminism is valid, but at the end he's going to make it about infant baptism because that's the point. The point, this is how a rhetorician works, okay? You boom. This is go to, like, your biggest argument is going to be the last thing they hear. And the last thing they hear is, if you don't believe in determinism, then infant baptism is not valid. Boom. That's your mic drop statement. It doesn't matter all your stupid arguments that you come up with on your way there. That's the mic drop statement that gets Pelagius exonerated or Pelagius condemned, because Pelagius believes in infant baptism. And all the Catholics believe in infant baptism. And that's what gets him outed. And so you fast forward all these years later, Augustine is operating on that exact same framework. Calvin is. He's read Augustine. I mean, this guy went from basically studying for law, and trust me, if you're studying for law, you're reading a lot of reading, okay? So what does he do? He comes here and he does a lot more reading. He's not reading all the canon law stuff that Luther's read. He's not reading Theological Germanica like Luther's read. He's reading Augustine, okay? Luther was influenced by Augustine, but he was also influenced by Theologica Germanica and canon law because he was a monk and because he was a German. Theologica Germanica, German theology, that's literally what it means. And that's where he gets his stupid ideas about God created Adam and Evil from the beginning. He doesn't call it that, but that's logically where it goes, okay? Calvin is going to read Augustine, and he's going to be like, oh, Augustine was just a BS artist like me. So you can just basically make up stuff. And Augustine was justifying violence where he wanted to. He was just a BS artist. If Augustine was not a Catholic priest, he would have been a lawyer. That's what his mouth was good for. Was just, here's what argument we want to win, so figure out how to do that. And okay, I'm good at this. It's like professional debaters. It's like people who join a debate club and they're like, argue this side or that side. And it's like, wait a minute, which one's right though? Why am I trying to argue a side that I don't agree with or I don't think is right? That's the point of debate club. It's rhetoric all over again. It's not about being right. It's about being persuasive. This is the goal. People join debate clubs to be BS artists. Okay? And this is who Calvin is. And he comes up with this. He's 24 years old. Okay? For one, he's been through law school by the time he's 20. Okay? Most of us haven't even gotten our associate's degree by 20. And he's been through law school. Okay? Then he's going to go get kicked out of France with his friend who basically is arguing for reform in one of the universities. And he's going to go, and by the age of, like, he gets saved, according to his own testimony. This is when he gets saved. And he goes to Basel and he sits under these guys and he's listening to all the guys who basically were in the Reformation. So Zwingli and Luther and Melanchthon and Thomas Erasmus and people who knew all those guys, okay? And he basically his job is to come up with a system that works for everybody. They tried to do this in Luther's own day, but Luther and Zwingli couldn't get along on the Eucharist. So he comes up with, you ready for it? Means. And means works. Okay? I don't care what any Calvinist tells you, means works. Means is like saying reasons, okay? It's your solution for everything. Well, God doesn't control everything because this happened and I control that. Means. It's just your catch-all solution for everything. Means is means whatever it needs to mean that I'm right, even though you just proved me wrong. I just say means. God uses means. Okay, what does that mean? It means no matter what you say and what you argue, all I need to do is say the word means, and means whatever it needs to mean. Okay? God's still in control. Why? But God didn't control this. God doesn't control evil. Yeah, God uses means. Why? Reasons, means. He uses means. Because it pleases him. There's your fundamental argumentation, is pleases him. And there's your rationale, means. Whatever doesn't fit with my rationale just falls under the category of means. Either God's directly controlling it, and there's my proof, or he's not directly controlling it, and I just throw in the word means, and there you go. We're done. What does that mean? It means if I want to overthrow the government, and God's going to use those means. And so God used me to overthrow the government because God wills it, and even though what I did was sin, God meant for it to happen because he used means. And so I'm going to do my Hail Mary or whatever to say that's wrong, but I'm happy that it happened, and you're happy that it happened, and I'm kind of a national hero now. Okay? This is what these guys do. It's just a liar's game. Okay? So what happens? So the Calvinists down here, along with the Lutherans and the Catholics, they like killing people. Okay? Calvinists enjoy killing people if they can't dominate them. They mostly like dominating and making money, but they kind of like killing because they were mercenaries before they were Calvinists. Let's be honest here, okay? You don't become a mercenary because you're like, I just want peace. No, you freaking don't. You get paid to kill people. You like killing people, okay? You guys think I'm making this stuff up. Go read your history and figure out what happened, okay? You have a theology that came from a culture of mercenaries, and you think this is about God. You think this is about Jesus. You think this is about love. No, this is about winning, and winning good, and winning with money, and winning with killing people, okay? It's a culture of mercenaries. It's a culture of mercenaries. The Pope still uses a Swiss Guard today. They don't care what side they're on. They just want money, and they want to kill them. Money for killing. Money for killing. Okay? We'll wear a funny uniform as long as we get to stab somebody with a spear once in a while. These people are jokers. Anyways, they're going to be up here. And because you've had all this religious fighting for like a century here, one of the things the Dutch like is money. I don't know if you've known many Dutch people, but they like money. And it turns out when they allow for religious kind of freedom in the universities to let people discuss their ideas openly, and they're going to attract a lot of professors. They're going to attract Catholic professors. They're going to attract Lutheran professors. They're going to attract Anabaptist professors. They're going to attract Zwinglian professors, Calvinist professors. They're going to attract all these different professors from all over the place. And then everybody's going to want to go to university there because these universities have the best minds in them. Okay? Because when you put diversity of thought together, it turns out you learn more. Who knew? Instead of being under the dominion of a group that needs to prove they're right about everything, and their being right needs to prove that there needs to be that the earth revolves around the sun, or the sun revolves around the earth, or the earth is flat, or the earth is hollow, or whatever, so that our side wins. You actually have a bunch of people who are trying to think about what actually is, and they don't have a bent to please some power. And it just so happens, since they're rebel scum, they don't have a power to please. Okay? And so while they're at war, and this war lasts for 80 years, okay? So while they're at war with Spain for 80 years, these universities are going to become pretty robust in terms of dialogue. And you're going to end up having people coming out of here or that are Unitarians. You're going to have people that are, like reforming Catholics. You're going to have the Anabaptists are going to have a home here. The Anabaptists are going to be farmers. And so you're going to have people who are pro-Anabaptist in the universities. And then you're going to have Calvinists. Well, the Calvinists don't like other people. They don't like other people. They like only Calvinists to win, and they're mercenaries, and they need someone to fight. And if they can't find somebody to fight outside their country, then they're going to fight somebody inside their country. Okay? And they basically need an enemy because they don't love people, because their God doesn't love people. Why the crap would they need to be a minority who's right, who's against a majority who's wrong? Why? Because that is the perfect reflection of their God. God loves a minority who he's made right and hates a majority who he's made wrong. And that's how they act. They need to, I don't care if they're overthrowing the government and dominating everybody. In their minds, They are a minority who's righteous. That's who they need to be, because that's who their God is. Why? Because the road to hell is wide and many are on it. So therefore we have to be a minority. The majority go to hell. But they don't go to hell of their own free will. Okay? So therefore, they must be dominated to go to hell. And we must be dominated to go to heaven. And so we must become an upper caste system over those people. Okay? This is their ideological bent because that's the God they worship. And so what do they do here? We can't have this freaking religious freedom. So enter into this equation Jacobus Arminius. Jacobus Arminius is going to grow up in the University of Leiden, I believe, which is going to be in the Netherlands. And he is very smart, and he's doing very well in his undergrad. And he's kind of poor. I think his mom died in one of these wars, something that happened like that. And he wants to go learn from the best of the best minds. And they're like, oh, well, the best scholars are in Switzerland. Because this was kind of the melting pot before this became the melting pot, okay? So this is when they're at the crossroads between the French and the Germans and the Zwinglians. And Erasmus was actually Dutch, so he's up here too. This was kind of the melting pot, okay, for religious ideas. And so you have strong religious minds here. You have a bunch of people who've been thinking about Reformation for 100 years and thinking about what the truth is for 100 years, and they've written big, thick books and have a lot of opinions, and so you want to go learn from them. And these guys have turned this into a degree system where you could be a master. What does a master mean? How do I get to being a master? Well, if you're a bachelor, you're learning from us. If you're a master, well, you can teach. And if you're a doctor, well, you can just tell people what reality is about everything, because you've arrived. Well, who decides that you can tell everybody about everything? Us? Wait a minute. Where does your authority to say that you have the authority to dictate what reality is come from? Ourselves. I think this is another mystery cult. I'm pretty sure this is another mystery cult, because I thought truth came from God through the apostles, through the church. Yeah, but we've always had this other institution called the academy, which is where people claim to have truth on the basis of secret knowledge, called gnosis. And yes, your university systems were either fostered by the Catholics, who are trying to teach you Catholic law and Catholic applied law, or they're fostered by the Orthodox and their descendants, which are going to be the Reformed, who are trying to teach you secret mystery knowledge. Okay? Those are your only sources you have of knowledge. Okay? You have the knowledge that supposedly came from the apostles and was passed down from generation, and the knowledge that supposedly came from your inbred internal logos that God has put in you in order to nurture you towards godhood through knowledge that you have deep down inside that only we can tell you what it actually should sound like. They're two cults. Okay? And yes, those cults have become the seminaries because they separated out, the people who just want to learn stuff about stuff from the people who want to wax eloquent about bullcrap having to do with theology, and they made seminaries, okay? Seminaries became separate schools to the universities, but they originally were the universities, okay? And now you have a bunch of people with these fake mystery cults called seminaries who are telling people, whether or not they're qualified to teach God's word, even though they're teaching it backwards, okay? Well, these universities, remember this is before there were seminaries as separate things, these are universities, and they're obviously theology is a big part of what they study in the university. And in this university, you're going to have Jacobus Arminius go to Geneva, and he is going to sit under, not Jeff Bezos, what's his name? Beza, Theodore Beza. And Theodore Beza is basically, he's basically the successor to Calvin. Okay, Calvin's dead. Beza takes over. He's older now. And he is essentially the leading Calvinist scholar. And he is advancing upon Calvinism, and he's arguing this stupid argument over infralapsarian or supralapsarianism. What the crap is this about? Oh man, because let me tell you something. Imagine all the churches are Gnostic, because they are, okay? And imagine you're literally down the rabbit hole. You're down the rabbit hole, and you're down the rabbit hole searching for the truth, and you come across David Icke on your left and Alex Jones on your right, okay? And you're like, who's more right between David Icke and Alex Jones? The guy who thinks he's Jesus and has said so on national television, or the guy who thinks God is a comet flying around in a black hole and he's seen him on Joe Rogan? Which one is the more credible witness on Christianity? I think I want to come out of this rabbit hole. No. We've tricked you into coming down here, and now you must decide which one of these guys is more like Jesus. Well, one of them flat out says he's Jesus, and the other one says he's seen God, and only Jesus has seen God. So you literally have two guys who basically said they're Jesus. And they're both a-holes. One believes in reptile people, and one believes in an underground QAnon war. Isn't that basically the same thing? No. One person believes they're reptiles. Okay, so one of them believes they're demon-possessed Satanists underground, and the other one believes they're reptiles underground. Yeah, like, isn't that basically the same thing? No. He literally believes they're reptile people, though. These are both really stupid ideas. Do I have to choose one of these ideas? Yes, you have to choose one of these ideas. Why? Because we'll kill you if you don't. Nobody gets to be neutral in this thing. If you're not with us, you're with the enemy. But I've just told you I'm not choosing the enemy. Nope. If you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. This is how this goes. This is humanity in a nutshell, okay? This is how stupid we are here, okay? This is how Satan gets you. Which one of these bad ideas are you going to side with? I feel like there's a better idea. I feel like I should leave the rabbit hole and go into the light instead of going down into the dark to find the truth. No, that is not optional. It's like, you sound like those stupid people who think they're slaves just because we've clearly told them they're free men. And no, they don't get to go anywhere because neither their bishop nor their lord will allow it. And yes, they have to keep working the land. And yes, they're impoverished and their kids get killed in the army every now and again. But they're free men. And you are a good Christian down in this rabbit hole. I feel like Jesus is the light and he came for the light and it's awful dark down here. And you have two guys arguing over which kind of crazy underground network of evil people are really running the world. Yeah. I don't want to choose. I choose Jesus. Okay, well, we're going to kill you. That's okay. You have to be okay with them killing you. You have to be okay with everyone rejecting you because that's what Jesus said was going to happen to his followers. You guys got to wrap your minds around that. You guys got to get to a point where you dying for Jesus is okay. Because this same false dichotomy is coming to America that has always been there, okay? Alex Jones and David Icke are just the underground version of Calvinists versus Catholics, okay? In case you can't figure out which one, the Calvinists launched 1776, and the Catholics are all about like underground Illuminati and crap. Okay? It's the same dichotomy. You just have a version of that for conspiracy theorists. Okay? So you have the people who need to be the minority, and you have the people who are the oldest and best. Okay? And of course, that's why Calvinists are going over to Orthodox, because when they fall for the oldest and best argument, they realize that the Orthodox are even older and bester, and it turns out all the Calvinist ideas came from them anyways. Okay? Well, one of the Orthodox ideas that come from the Calvinists is this idea called Arminianism. And this doesn't start out like this. It's not about this starting out. What it starts out is with this stupid debate about superlapsarian or infiltratianism. And he didn't ask for this debate. He didn't start with this debate. He was assigned this debate. Okay? Now listen to how this goes down. Jacobus Arminius is going to go to Geneva. He gets into an argument with Beza. We don't know what this is about, but Beza sounds like he's kind of a dick. Okay? And so Jacobus Arminius is going to go to Basel. And he is going to study under this other guy, which is the same guy who advised Thomas Cranmer. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's the same guy who advised Thomas Cranmer to basically come up with the Reformation in England, like their theology, so the Anglican theology, okay? This is why the Anglicans fall for Calvinism, because they're influenced by reformers that mixed with the Calvinists, okay? They're not necessarily all Calvinists at this point, okay? You don't have a monolithic Calvinism until you get to the Synod of Dort, okay? Calvinism is more like Augustinianism, and since Augustinianism was created as kind of, basically to defeat Pelagius and to sell something to the Orthodox, you have Orthodox ideas that work with Calvinism, which is why you have more people listening to Calvinism, okay? Calvin is not the hard determinist that Beza is. But it becomes hard determinism at the Synod of Dort. And so they're going to get in this argument, this Synod of Dorks are going to get into this argument first about superlapsarianism versus infralapsarianism. And you guys are like, well, what does that mean? Trust me, it doesn't matter. Trust me, it doesn't matter. The reason I brought up David Icke versus Alex Jones is because, that's a clear dichotomy that's just there is no winner there, okay? You're a loser if you know who those are, okay? You should be embarrassed if you literally can espouse what David Icke and Alex Jones believe, because that means you have wasted a substantial amount of your life listening to David Icke and Alex Jones, which I have, okay? Trust me, YouTube used to be not as clean as it is now, okay? They used to let everything on YouTube, and there's a whole lot of crazy on YouTube when autoplay goes on and you're going through a depressed period in your life and you're just like, I'm going to take a cigarette break once in a while and then just let autoplay play, and it's just going to take you deeper and deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole of stupidity before you're like, this is stupid, why am I listening to this? And then you need to cast demons out of yourself because it's so bad. Anyways, this is exactly what this is. Superlapsarian versus infralapsarian is literally okay, we know God determines who gets saved. And we know God determined the fall was going to happen. But the question is did he determine who got saved before or after he determined the fall? This is how dumb this is. Did God decide? This is all in eternity past, okay? This is in the secret counsels of God. I thought the secret things belong to God. I thought he doesn't do anything on earth unless he reveals it to his servants, the prophets, though. Okay, so we need to figure out God's secrets. We know that he determines everything that comes to pass because he picks who gets saved and who goes to hell from the beginning. But the question is, if he picked them for hell before determining that they would fall, wouldn't that be unjust? This is how dumb these people are. If they decided who was going to go to hell before he decided he was going to be evil, that would make him unjust. So this is the debate. Yeah, that's true. He had to decide that they'd be evil before he decides to judge them for it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. This is how dumb these people are. I'm not exaggerating this. This is the argument, okay? And Jacobus Arminius already gets into an argument with Beza because Beza is apparently a dick. And he goes to study in Basel under another guy, okay? Or from Geneva to Basel. And then in Basel, he very quickly shows up, and within a year, they're like, dude, you are so smart. You're leaps and bounds above us. We're going to give you an honorary doctorate. And because Jacobus Arminius is not a dick, he's like, no, that doesn't feel right. I don't like the idea that I left this school and went over to that school and proved myself smart and got an honorary doctorate. So this guy actually has the humility to go back to Geneva and study under the professor who he doesn't really care for that much, which is Beza, okay? And he proves his humility, and he ends up going and getting a pastoral position in the Netherlands with recommendations from the guy who basically fostered the English Reform movement and the top Calvinist in the world, okay? So you literally have, of the non-Lutheran reformers, the two top guys of the non-Lutheran reformers of his day both attest to his intelligence and his character. I want you to think about this. The top Calvinist of his day and the second top Reformed influencer of his day both attest to his intelligence and his character. And that's how he gets his first pastoral job, okay? So how does he go down as the devil after that? Well, the answer is simple. They assign him this stupid mother effing, like, I don't care what somebody says about swearing, okay? These people are killing people over ideas this dumb, okay? If they want to stand before God and be like, that guy cussed when he said how stupid we were, I'll slap him in front of Jesus, and Jesus will be like, okay, I won't do that in front of Jesus. I'll shut the F up in front of Jesus, and Jesus will do it, okay? These guys are going to say, okay, here's your first assignment as a pastor. I thought my assignment as a pastor is to preach the word, and no. We need a debate. We need to debate. Why? Because we're Calvinists, damn it. We are rhetoricians, and you need to prove yourself to our new club of Illuminati, okay? Eventually we'll come up with the skull and bones where we're going to pee on you, and then you can join the CIA. But right now, we need you to prove yourself by being our attack dog against, I don't even remember which side he's on, but let's say superlapsarian. Beza's position is superlapsarian. He's infralapsarian. Go argue Beza's position. This is debate club. I don't even know if I agree with Beza's position. I actually sat under Beza as a professor, and he was kind of a tool. So I don't even know if I agree with his position. Well, go argue Beza's position. Do it. Okay. So Arminius is going to start studying because he's going to argue Beza's position against some other guy who's arguing the other position, and Calvinists just need to have a debate. They need to have a fight over something that is inconsequential, which is why if Calvinists get to the point where they have power in America, I promise they're going to just start arguing over which consequential, because what Calvinists never, ever actually evolved to doing is going out and sharing the gospel with people because they don't believe it's going to make a difference. Okay? Oh, there's some Calvinists, and they're mostly Baptist Calvinists, who do that occasionally because they know God uses means and they're trying to be obedient. But the truth is that's just rhetorical bullcrap in their system that some people feel convicted to play out and most don't. Most are content to use church growth methodology to grow churches by lying about being Calvinists, or taking over other churches by lying about being Calvinists, or back in the day, overthrowing a government and forcing you to be Calvinists, okay? They're not evangelical. The evangelical movement was largely an answer to the non-evangelical Lutherans, Calvinists, Catholics, and Anglicans, okay? That's what evangelicalism is. But now they're trying to convince you that Calvinists are evangelical. Why? Because they're liars. Because they're liars. They're professional liars and mercenaries, okay? And that's why they're trying to sell you on the idea that freaking Jonathan Edwards, who killed the Great Awakening twice, was the founder of it. They're liars. They're just lying to you, okay? If you start trying to relegate it down to terms that aren't that simple, you're getting sucked in. You want to believe, because these people believe they're good, that I have to believe they're innocent or they're sincere in what they're doing. No, they're not. They're liars. They lie to themselves. Remember what Paul talks about people. They're deceiving and being deceived. But he still says they're evil. Okay? Just because they're deceived, they're working just as hard against the Holy Spirit to deceive themselves as they are to deceive everybody else. And part of their MO for needing to deceive everybody else is to recapitulate and reinforce their own deception. That's how all sinners work, okay? That's why these people out there need you to believe in gay marriage. They need you to believe in abortion. They need you to believe in trans rights and all this stuff. Well, why? Because their conscience is telling them, you're wrong, 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 you're wrong. And they need to have everybody to agree so they can drown out the Holy Spirit, drown out their conscience, and go, nope, the majority says I'm right. That's what they need to do. In their minds, they're a persecuted minority, and then once they're a majority, they kill everybody else. Why? That's the nature of sin. That's why Cain killed Abel. Why? Because Abel was righteous and he was wicked. He invented a system of works and giving his sacrifice by his works and atoning for his sins by himself. And Abel just offered up a lamb because he saw God kill a lamb to cover up Adam and Eve's sin, and he just offered a memorial of what God had done. There's the gospel. There's works in the gospel right there. And these guys take the word works and they exchange it with the word means and act like it's something different when it's not something different. They take the word means of grace and act like it's different than Roman Catholic sacramentalism, and it's not. It's the exact same thing. They've just renamed it. Okay? Just like New Agers, just like progressives, progressives used to be emergent church. They used to be, before that, they used to be liberals. Before that, they used to be Unitarians. Before that, they used to be Orthodox, okay? I'm sorry, but the Orthodox is where all this stuff comes from because they were Gnostics. They were open Gnostics. They just keep renaming themselves, okay? Calvinists are Gnostics. The Catholics are Gnostics. The Orthodox are Gnostics. They're all Gnostics, okay? They all tell you the secret knowledge that makes no sense in your head and doesn't really align with anything Jesus says is how you get saved. That's what a Gnostic is. Secret mystery knowledge gets you saved. Really? Yes, how? By doing what we tell you. That's how. It's always the keepers of the mystery cult who are basically just saying, do what I tell you, bitch, and then you'll go to heaven. Okay? Instead of Jesus, who is saying, follow me, I'm humble, I'm also free, but people kick me around once in a while because they don't like truth. And I speak the truth. I speak truth to power, okay? And sometimes speaking truth to power is not saying anything. And you let them win, you let them roll over you, and then you let them basically slander you and all this stuff, and you just sit there and just go, prove it. And they can get all their false witnesses and get their majority and get their crowd chanting, crucify him, and you say, but me and God are a majority, and you lose. And sometimes you have to die and rise from the dead before they see that they lose. But they're gonna lose, okay? That's what you have to do. You have to get to this point where you're just like, I don't care what people think. Not because I'm rebellious and I just pride myself on not caring what people think, but because they're wrong and I'm right and I'm standing before God and I understand that sometimes you're right and you go down swinging. You don't win in this world, but you win in eternity, okay? Sometimes that's what being right is, okay? So Jacobus Arminius, he's going to start reading this stupid infralapsarianism versus superlapsarian argument. And he's going to start thinking. If you guys are saying that God needs to make a judgment based on what he foresees someone doing in order to be just, because that's what one side is saying, I'm going to take that logic one step further to say God can foresee what a person is going to believe in the future in order to justify them. Because the Bible seems to say that you're justified on account of your faith, not that you're given faith on account of being justified. A lot. It seems to say that over and over and over again. And the other thing that you're all hanging your hat on, it doesn't seem to say at all. In fact, this seems to have come from Luther's weird mystical theological Germanica, which said that God made people evil from the beginning. And what the crap, where did he get that from? He was a mystic. He imagined it. Okay? And so he's sitting here going, so I have to basically argue a position that says God is not just. He's not just if he condemns somebody before determining that they're going to fall. In other words, he's determining something that's going to happen in the future and then making a judgment based on that determination in the future. It's almost like he's in time making those decisions, but I can't say he's making those decisions in time. He has to be making them from eternity past, which doesn't exist. That's not how time travel works. There's no such thing as eternity past. This was all born out of stupid, bad translations of the Septuagint that necessitated an eternity past because it said that Jesus was born and created. Or wisdom, which they called Jesus. Okay? It was because of those bad translations that they created eternity past, and now they're dictating that everything must happen in eternity past because God can't change. And if God can't change, there's nothing that we can do in time that can affect any of God's decisions. And Jacobus Arminius is going, but you're arguing as if it was. You're arguing as if our decisions do affect God. You're arguing that God is going to determine that we fall, and then on the basis of our fall is going to make his decision. So you are arguing that our decisions affect God. You're just wrapping it up in time travel to say it all happened in eternity past. So I'm going to take this one step further and say God is going to foresee that we believe, and on the basis of that foresight, which is actually what the word providence means, God chooses who's saved. Boom. There's Arminianism in a nutshell. Okay? It's wrong, because it's still based on eternity past, which doesn't exist. It's wrong, but it makes a lot more sense with a lot more Bible verses than Calvinism does. Okay? And he's going to say, because Calvin only said that regeneration precedes faith for infants who are being baptized, it doesn't really disagree with Calvinism either. Because Calvinism is not concretely saying that regeneration precedes faith as a principle. He's just saying God magically makes that work for infants because that's why it's a sacrament and it's a means, and it's not, it's not the Roman Catholic version because of reasons. Okay? That's what Calvin's going to say. And so he's going to argue, hey, I'm a good Calvinist. By this time, Beza's dead. Or no, maybe Beza's still alive. Could be wrong. I think Beza's dead by this time, though. Because he's going to be dead before this whole thing is settled, okay? He never gets condemned or anything like this. He dies in 1609, okay? In fact, let's look up Theodore Beza right now. I know, he kind of looks like Tom Bombadil there. Maybe he is Tom Bombadil. After all, Tom Bombadil controls everything. Theodore Beza is going to die in 1605, so it looks like he's still around when this conflict is starting, but he's 86. He dies before the Synod of Dort. Okay, I think Synod of Dort is like 1611, I believe. But anyways, he's old. These guys were born 1519, 1560. So Beza apparently lives to be 86, and he lives to be 49, which proves that God cursed him because he's evil. Since we're superstitious, you've got to put yourself in the mindset of superstitious Calvinists. These people are burning people. They're going to start burning witches after the 30 Years' War because they can't figure out how the 30 Years' War had to do with their stupid religious arguments. So they're going to blame witches for it and start burning witches all over Europe. Okay, you can't make up how dumb these people are. Dumb. Okay, so he's going to argue his stuff, and they're going to be like, he's going to have Calvinists start coming up against him and trying to get him in trouble with the law. Why? Our republic has Calvinist confessions, and Jacob Arminius is saying there's nothing that I'm saying that is necessarily against your Calvinist confessions. And these are like the Helvetic Confessions and the Belgian Confession, Heidelberg Catechism. This is where this stuff comes from, okay? And he's like, so the stuff that I'm arguing doesn't necessarily agree with that stuff, and so I don't see what the problem is here. And of course, he's way smarter than these people, and these people don't really know what they believe. They just believe that, well, we're not Lutherans and we're not Catholics, so we're Reformed. And some Calvinists help us write some Reformed stuff, and we have the Heidelberg Catechism to indoctrinate our kids, and we have the Belgic Confession to say what we all believe here, and so that's what we believe. And he's like, well, I'm not disagreeing with that, so I don't see what your problem is, and if you got anyone smart enough to prove that I am, then bring them, and they can't bring anybody, and so they're like, listen, why don't you just not say stuff that is not in keeping with what the Reformed stuff that we have, because it was passed down from time immemorial, aka 50 years ago. Okay, like this is all brand new stuff. Okay, nobody's like, from the days of the apostles, we know when Paul looked this up in the 1611 King James, he clearly declared that Baptists started with John the Baptist and Calvinists started with Paul. Okay, and the Baptists are in the Old Covenant, and the Calvinists are in the New Covenant. Okay, so we've determined this. Now, I mean, they're that dumb, but right now they're just arguing semantics about stuff that never existed in reality. Okay, these people are in quarks and string theory by now. They're trying to argue which version of the multiverse should have been better. Okay, like there's no reality in anything these guys are arguing, and so when he's just like, what I said agrees with the Belgic Confessions and the Heidelberg Calvinism. If I don't prove it, they can't prove it. And he keeps his teaching position for like a decade or so. But the Calvinists know, like, hey, he's coming up against our sacred calf, and our sacred calf is really determinism. We love us some determinism. Why? Because determinism justifies our rebellion. God wills it, biatch. Okay, that's why we love it. That's why they love determinism. Determinism is their excuse for anything. Okay? Whatever they do, trust me, I have heard this live. I don't think we were supposed to merge with that church because, the pastor went and merged with that church without so much as a vote or a meeting or anything. He just said, we're going to do this. And then he ran out all the leaders of that church, ran out the pastor of that church. Now he's literally doing a stage performance where he's stabbing a pig's heart to try to prove to us how much God hates our sin. This is weird. And this guy seems to be an idiot. We don't have a prayer group. We don't have a Bible study. And he just ruined the church. And it went from 150 people to 30 people in like a year. And now he's blaming me for it because God gave me a prophetic dream, told me we're not supposed to be doing any of this stuff we're doing. And it turns out he just stole the youth group from his original church in the first place. And so he's pretty much been a bullheaded, don't listen to anybody guy since he was a teenager. And that's why he's a senior pastor at age 25. I don't think any of this is God's will. And what is the answer from the Calvinist? It was God's will because it happened. I kid you not. This is an actual conversation. It was God's will because it happened. That's how real Calvinists think. Determinism is their justification for everyone. You murdered a baby, though. Well, God determined that I did. I kid you not. They're not going to say this stuff out loud because it sounds really bad. But in the dark recesses of their mystery cult halls, that's really what they believe. That's how they think, okay? And you can say, no, there's nuanced Calvinists. There's 4-point Calvinists. There's Calvinists who have logical cognitive dissonance in their heads, and they balance, opposites, and they're just juggling ideas that don't mix all the time. Yes, I know. And that's why those people who are too busy trying to make things that don't make sense in their head and just juggle them all the time are so susceptible to brainwashing and government propaganda. That's why they're like that. That's why they get tooled back and forth to different bad ideas because they're holding up ideas that don't logically work together in their head. And they've already entered into this state of cognitive dissonance and thinking doesn't really make as much sense as it needs to. And I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm just going to go with the crowd. I'm just going to go with the majority. That's why they're like that. Okay? Jacobus Arminius is going to basically sit in his chair for a while, and then he's going to be like, you know what, this sucks. I'm always getting these stupid Calvinists who always want to argue Calvinism with me. I'm pretty sure that God actually is choosing to save people on the basis of actual faith that they have. I'm just going to go with that, okay? And he goes with a Calvinist version of that, and it's closer to the Bible than what the Calvinists believe. It's still wrong, but he basically goes back to the University of Leiden because he's super smart and he's well-liked there, and he's like, I'm just going to be a professor in the university where I can actually say what I think without stupid Calvinists with half my intellect trying to argue with me on the basis of pseudo-authority, okay? So he goes to the University of Leiden. He becomes a teaching professor there. Now, during this time, you have two guys in the Netherlands who are influential, smart, liberal thinking, progressive, and one of them happens to be the prime minister. And his name is this guy named Johan van Oldenbarnevelt. Okay? Dutch have really long names. They feel obligated to put the word van in them, which is why they all end up in a van down by the river because they're so cheap. Okay? Actually happens in real life. Hugo Grotius is kind of his protege, and these guys are diplomats, okay? And Johan van Oldenbarnevelt is going to basically be the prime minister of the Dutch Republic, okay? He's the first servant, but in a congressional republic, that essentially makes him the king, okay, without having necessarily a king's nobility or title, okay, because he's the chief executive. And this guy is the guy who negotiated the truce with the Spanish. And he's got people who don't like him for doing that already, okay? He also has opinions about the universities, and he's like, this bringing people into our universities thing because of free thinking in our universities is a good thing. He actually has these crazy ambitions to stop the religious wars in Europe, get Christians that are all Catholic, Protestant, and Lutheran to actually stop killing each other, have peace, and let these fights happen in the universities where there's free speech, and stop the political non-stop murdering of each other. His crazy idea. Okay? They're going to kill him for this. Okay? He ends up the prime minister. Hugo Grotius, I think he ends up like, I think he's the head of the university or something. He has something to do with the universities. I forget what, but he ends up getting this truce signed with Spain, and in this interim peace, he's basically going to try to push for internal reforms that need to push down these violent mob Calvinists who are being tools all over the Republic. Well, what are the Calvinists doing? Well, remember, the Calvinists are tools, and they need to have a problem. They need to fight somebody. They need to bully people. They need to just win. Okay? And so what are they doing? Well, you have this movement spreading called Arminianism. Okay? And these people, after Jacob Arminius, his ideas kind of make sense because we can find some of the things he says in the Bible, and we can't find nearly anything that the Calvinists say in the Bible. It seems like it's all just Gnostic philosophy, and it seems like God seems to save people on the basis of their faith, not give them faith because he's chosen to save them. It's just what it seems like. It seems like there's a lot of Bible verses that seem to say this. Okay? And so their alternatives, they have two bad ideas and they have to pick between one, and they're picking Arminianism in groves. And what they're doing is the Arminians are starting to pop up in the churches. And what the Calvinists are starting to do is say, oh, well, we're forcing you out of the church. Well, this guy is saying, no, you can't do that. Legally, listen, all these guys paid their tithes, helped build that building, blah, blah, blah. You can't kick these people out because they are Arminian. Okay? Arminius was a Calvinist. We have not proven that anything he's done goes against the Belgic Confession or the Heidelberg Catechism, because the Heidelberg Catechism and all that is not necessarily, it's very deterministic, but Arminianism is not anti-deterministic. What it is this anti-God picking to give you faith against your will, basically. That's what it is. And so it argues that people listen to this. It argues that people have a choice whether to believe or not. And that's the means that God uses, okay? It's just another version of Calvinism. You just throw the word means in there and that works too. Well, that's the means. The means God uses is my choice. And that's closer to Augustinianism anyways. And it's not disagreeing with really anything Calvin says, technically, okay? Because Calvinist was a BS artist anyways, okay? And so you have these Arminians that are populating in the churches, and what are the Calvinists doing? Well, they're basically using mobs to throw all these people out of the church and take over the churches. And this guy's like, no, that's illegal. Everybody agrees it's illegal. They vote on this. This is illegal. No, we're not going to have a religious civil war within our country while we're trying to fight an outside war which is a civil war, with the Spanish Empire. Okay? So everybody agrees with him on that count. Okay, well, the Calvinists are unruly because they're rebel scum, and they're always unruly. And so they keep going, and so he eventually forms a police force to basically force the Calvinists to comply with the law. Okay? And at this point, he has an opponent. Remember, he's had opponents since he signed that truce with Spain. There are people who are not happy that he did that. They thought they had the edge and they should have kept fighting. Okay? This guy is actually trying to work towards civil peace in Europe. He's one of a group of people. Remember, they're already attracting Catholics, Protestants, Lutherans, and all that stuff in their university, and he thinks we can turn this into religious peace in Europe. This is not a harebrained idea. Okay? He's saying, let's go back to having different states with some of them having religious freedom in them. In those states where you have religious freedom, just so you know, that's how America became the most powerful country in the world, okay? Those states who have religious freedom are going to attract all the best minds. The money-making minds, people with money who can afford to move, people who don't want to be persecuted where they are, and that freedom of thought is going to get people to come to your country. And he knows this, okay? And this is the guy, just so you know, who invents the joint stock corporation. So he's thinking like a straight up Dutchman, okay? This will make us money. We'll have moneyed interests coming to our country from other countries who are persecuting, or they're hardworking, or they're looking for a job, or they're looking for freedom, and we're going to be able to capitalize on that, okay? I'm not saying this guy was like the hand of God and the Holy Spirit was guiding him in everything he did. I'm saying he was probably money motivated. But what he was saying was reasonable, and if they had listened, the Netherlands would have become the America of Europe, okay? But the Calvinists effed it up because the Calvinists F everything up. In fact, they're going to F everything up until you get to America and until they're vastly outnumbered by evangelicals, and that's why they can't do it in America, okay? And that's why they've been doing stealth Calvinism takeovers ever since. So what are they going to do with von Oberfeld? Well, the Calvinists and his opponents in the Dutch nobility are going to use this as an opportunity to go after him. When he makes this police force to start putting down the unruly Calvinists, he's not trying to murder people. He's trying to police the fact that they can't bully other people out of the churches, okay? And so he builds this police force, and he has an opponent, and his opponent is going to say, hey, this guy's starting a civil war. It's the Calvinists who are starting the Civil War. It's the Calvinists who are using force and violence to take over, because they're not, when you take over a church, you're really taking over a town, okay? That is the town hall. And what you're basically saying is we control this town, okay? And so he's trying to bring civil order, and his opponents are going to accuse him of starting a civil war because he's raising a police force to do so. Okay? And they're just basically saying he's raising an army for a civil war. And so they accuse him of that. And at the same time, they're going to get the Synod of Dort, which is going to be a statewide contest to make the Arminians out to be seditionists. Okay? Even though the Calvinists are the ones being violent and being the seditionists, they're going to make the Arminians out to be the seditionists. And what do? They accuse the Arminians of basically being Jesuits, being Catholics, because the Catholics believe in prevenient grace too. They know this is what Augustine believed. And they basically are saying that that we find a Catholic theologian that said the Arminian position is more right. Because remember, the Catholics believe in free will. They condemn Luther over rejecting free will. Okay? And we're talking about Catholic theology versus Catholic polity. Okay? I am not pro-Catholic theology. It's very, very wrong too. But in a lot of individual points and individual arguments, they're right. Okay? That's why you have Luther who tries to throw out the book of James, and the Catholics come up with a theory that actually incorporates what's said in the book of James. Who's more right? Well, probably not the guy who's throwing out books of the Bible by the guy who knew Jesus longer than everybody. Probably that guy's wrong. Okay? The Catholics were more right than the Lutherans when it came to understanding what James was saying, okay? Yes, Paul, I'm going to have a whole video on this. Paul never teaches justification by faith alone. You need to hear this. Paul never teaches justification by faith alone. He teaches justification by faith apart from the works of the law. That is not alone. It needs to bear fruit. You can call that lordship salvation if you want to, but if you say I'm saved because I believe that Jesus rose from the dead, but I don't ever follow Jesus, Jesus flat out says you're going to hell, okay? He says, why do you call me Lord and then you don't do what I tell you, okay? This is where the free grace people get jacked up. They teach salvation by faith alone. The Bible doesn't even teach justification by faith alone, okay? It teaches justification by faith that is accompanied by works, okay? And yes, there's a duality to justification. I'm going to get into this in another video. Paul in Galatians is going to teach that we have a hope for a justification because there's a future justification. We have it now by faith. Just like Abraham had his promise by faith, and then he had it after he sacrificed Isaac. And God says, because you've done this, I'm going to do this, okay? Abraham had works to match his faith. And that's what James is arguing, okay? Well, these guys are idiots, and they have been teaching anti-free will, and obviously you can't have works if you don't have a free will. There you go. And then the Calvinists are going to say, no, God magically makes you have a free will, but those works do not account for your justification at all. Yes, they do, according to the Bible. Okay, they account for your final justification of the Great White Throne. And they're saying, nope, we don't stand before the Great White Throne. Yes, you do. That's what Matthew 25 is describing. It's not describing whole nations being thrown into the lake of fire for how they treated the Jews. It's describing you having fruit to back up your faith. You say you have faith. Is it dead faith or is it living faith? In other words, do you give intellectual consent to something, but you don't have the Holy Spirit in you because you've never really wanted Jesus to be Lord of your life? Yeah, that doesn't count. God is not going to be outdone by a lawyer. You're not going to show up to God and lawyer your way in because you said, I confess that Jesus is Lord and I believe that God raised him from the dead. Boom, you have to let me into heaven. You were evil your whole life. Yeah, but I believe that Jesus rose from the dead and I confess that he's Lord. Yeah, but you didn't mean it though. You confessed that he's Lord, but you didn't actually mean he's my Lord. You just said the words. That's not what confession is. Okay? So this is where those people are going to get it wrong. Theodore Beza is going to get it wrong. Anyways, Jacob Arminius is going to have this opponent who's a big tool, and everybody knows he's a tool. His name is Gomarus, okay? And Gomarus is basically going to start up crap with him in the university, and he's going to keep stirring up people against him. And he's going to make up fallacious bullcrap arguments about him being in league with the Pope, because this is what Calvinists do. They lie and slander. He's going to make up arguments about him being in league with the Pope. And then eventually they're going to use it because, remember, this guy had a truce with Spain, and they're going to start rolling over these arguments about him and saying, these guys are all working for the Spanish, and they're all going to betray our revolution. And they make it about that, okay? And they tie it in with the Synod of Dort and make it about the Arminians and him, because remember, he is for religious freedom, so he is trying to get them to be, he's not an Arminian, all right? He's not an Arminian, he's trying to get the Calvinists to quit bullying the Arminians. He's trying to have religious freedom in the universities and civility in the civil sphere, okay? And they're going to make it about these guys are all collaborating with the Pope and with the Spanish crown, and they're overthrowing our revolution, and we prove it, and I seen them swear an oath to the Jesuits. They're just liars. They're just liars because they're Calvinists, okay? And so what they're going to do is they're going to say, it's all this Arminius stuff. Here is a Catholic priest who says Arminius was right, and therefore Arminius is wrong. Boom. It's kind of like Augustine saying it's all about infant baptism. Why? Because that's what gets the crowd on your side. These one-liners. Yeah, that's why you have Catholics agreeing with you. Boom. Ooh, that worked really good in the Reformation. George Major is a guy who is a student of Melanchthon, looked at Romans 10 and said, hey, wait a minute. You have to believe in order to confess, and you have to confess in order to be saved. That's a very clear logical progression there in Romans 10. This whole thing about God justifying you and because he's regenerated you doesn't work. And what did they say to him? They said, you are a papal sympathizer and we're going to crap on your grave until you die. These people slandered the crap out of George Major. Why? Because he was being reasonable. Okay? And the first people to go down when you have people who want to fight is the reasonable guy in the middle. Those are the first victims of conflicts. When the fog of war hits, those are the first victims. Those are the people who are trying to be reasonable and see both sides. Okay? George Major acknowledged where the Catholics were right, and they called him a papal sympathizer, and he's on the Pope's side, and we're trying to fight the Pope, and you're the enemy. And they're going to do the same thing with the Arminians. You agree with something that the Catholics say, so therefore you're the enemy. And Jacob Arminius is an old man. He dies before this thing. Okay, so Dort was in 1619, so like 10 years after he dies. He's going to die, and they're going to basically condemn the Arminians nationwide and say, we're outlawing Arminianism. In fact, we're outlawing anything that's not Calvinist. And after this, they're going to start persecuting the Baptists, the Anabaptists, because they're both there. You have the English Baptists and the Anabaptists there. Helwys and John Smythe have come from England, mixed with the Anabaptists, and come up with the General Baptists by now. Okay? They're going to persecute them. They're going to persecute the Arminians. They're going to there are Unitarians among them. They're going to start persecuting the Unitarians. There are, because remember, Michael Servetus kind of forefathered the Unitarians, okay? And I'm not saying he was a full-on Unitarian. He's probably like a more closer to an Arminian. I haven't read his stuff enough to know here's what he really believed. I don't know, okay? I just know that they killed him for denying the deity of Christ and infant baptism. Okay, so if it was just denying the deity of Christ, that seems like plenty, but they killed him for denying infant baptism, and that makes his denying the deity of Christ highly suspect. Okay, but anyways, you're going to have Unitarians there. You're going to have Arminians there. You're going to have Reforming Catholics there. All of them. Out. They're going to out them from the universities. They're going to start taking over the universities and say the universities can only teach Calvinism now. And all the crap, everything good that was starting to be fostered there is going to leave and go to England. And that's where you're going to have a bunch of different reform movements come out of England. Some of it's going to go back to Switzerland. Some of it's going to go to Germany. It's going to leave, and it's going to start popping out again in things like the Moravian Church and the Evangelicals and the Quakers and all this stuff like that. And yes, you're going to have Unitarians come out too. They're going to come out in Poland, and they're going to come out in America and in England after the Reformation. But the point is they could have been this. They could have been that England or that America who had not just a bunch of economic power, but the religious freedom that was drawing in all the economic power. Okay? But they didn't, because why? Because Calvinists only know how to take over and kill a good thing. Okay? They know how to take over and kill a good thing. That's what they're going to do with the Great Awakening. That's what they're going to do with the evangelical movement. That's what they're going to do with the moral majority. That's what they're going to do with everything that's come after it. They take over and destroy it. And when it's destroyed, they're just going to say that's what God willed, and they're going to go back to being that right minority that they always believe they are in their heads. Okay? That's what they do. And they're going to capture the weaker-minded people first, because the Jedi mind trick doesn't work on smart people. It only works on dumb people. And that's why Jabba the Hutt and that other guy who's just about making money, they know. This crap don't work on me. It only works on the weak-minded. Okay? Think about this. In the galaxy, the Jedi are so powerful, and that you got Jabba the Hutt is just like, here's what I think your Jedi mind trick. Think about that. You want to be more like Jabba the Hutt. Okay? He gives the finger. He gives the finger to the Empire. The Hutts are running stuff. That's why they're so fat and in charge, right? They're like the kingpin. They're like the Suge Knights of the galaxy, right? They don't care about your Empire. They don't care about your Mandalorians. They don't care about your Jedis. They don't care about your Siths. They give the finger to your Jedi mind trick, okay? This stuff works on the weak-minded. These guys are like, look how smart we are. Look at, we're all inbred. We all look alike. We all have the same beards. We all wear the same weird girly neck collar thing. Why? Because we're followers. That's why. We follow. We bow down. We follow. Look at, this is how, look at, there's more weight. There's a sword on top of it. So it has more weight. There's papers on top of it. And there's the sword on top of it. What is this signifying here? They're saying might makes right. Okay? That's what they're saying. That's why there's a sword on top of this Bible, and there's papers on top of this Bible, and the sword wins. The pen is not mightier than the sword. The sword is mightier than the pen, okay? That's some Illuminati crap right there. Look at justice over here being blind, and look at the sword winning over the paper, okay? These people know what's going on. Might makes right. And that's why Hitler's going to claim that game, and he's going to take over all of them, okay? These guys are going to persecute all these people. The Anabaptists are going to flee to Czechia, where they're more welcome there, and then they're going to get pushed out. Okay, the 30 Years' War is going to have to happen after this. Within 20 years of this, the English Revolution is going to start, and Cromwell is going to do some killing. He's going to do a lot of killing in the name of Jesus, and then he's going to invite the Jews to live there because he thinks he's going to usher in the millennium. Okay, these guys are not just stupid about infant baptism. They're not just stupid about how to get saved. They're really stupid about eschatology. And they think they're going to bring in the kingdom of heaven on earth, first through violence, then through progressive reforms. And that's where it's going to turn into the liberal, the teetotalers, the people who ban alcohol from America and create the mafia. That creates the mafia. You created crime rings from Prohibition. And what happened? Well, you created a gap in the market for crime rings to start, and so you have rum runners and pirates and bootleggers and all these people all of a sudden becoming mafias. And then when these mafias, when Prohibition goes away, well, these mafias, we've been training people in an underground network of crime for decades now. We got to use them somewhere, and they get into every other thing, like casinos, and eventually rap music. Okay, they get into drugs. They get into basically running congressmen. They get into protection money. They get into illegal gambling. They're just networks of thugs that enforce stuff and also sneak money around, because it started with Prohibition, and Prohibition started with liberal Calvinists trying to bring in the kingdom through forcing people to do stuff that God never said they had to do. Like not working on Sunday and like not drinking. Okay? God's not against you having to drink. He's against drunkenness. He's not against you having sex. He's just against you having sex with everybody. Okay? It's the same thing. All things in the right context are lawful. But I shall not be mastered by anything. Okay? Calvinists are dumb. Calvinists are dumb. Calvinists are dumb. Batman out, peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.